Hey my dear friends, Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. Today we're test driving the 2021 Kia Sorento Hybrid, Kia's newest three-row crossover SUV with the fuel economy of a compact car. So I'm going to show it to you inside and out. We're going to take it for a drive, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. All right, my friends, before we get out of the test drive, I gotta apologize for all the extra background noise here. I shoot here at sort of a redneck red state golf course, which means I've got golfers all around me that are drinking cheap beer and screaming and yelling and hooting and hollering from their carts, and I've got lawnmowers left and right because they don't stop mowing the lawn just because there's people golfing on the green. It's just that kind of place. Beautiful to look at though. But that said, let's talk about the car. Here we have Kia Sorento Hybrid EX, which means it's the top of the line for the Hybrid Sorento, $38,000 and some change. The only option here being the runway red paint, which is actually quite striking, I must say. I like it. And this is pretty much an all-new design. Looking at the front, you can see they've actually done a lot of sculpting in the grille. It's not just sort of a pasted wallpaper effect like some grills on cars. There's a lot going on there in the way of bits and parts and pieces. You can really look at that thing for a while. Headlights on this, LED headlights, which have a nice sharp crisp look. Down in the lower fascia, a lot going on there too, and there you'll also find LED fog lights. Coming around to the side, the wheels on this are a little bit more aerodynamic, which means they don't have a lot of relief in a 3D sense. They are 17-inch alloy wheels with low rolling resistance tires. Coming down the side, I have to start pointing out a few things that look to me like, well, I don't know, sophomoric or high school grade details. It's like somebody said to a high school student on their notebook in class, here, draw an SUV that's really cool. And they got the shape and the overall silhouette right, but they started putting these strange little details on the thing that just look like extra added details that are just there for the sake of being there, like this little shark fin that's backwards on the window line up front. That sort of what looks like it could be a vent, but it's just a piece of trim stuck on there that doesn't really seem to have any context with the rest of the design. And I hate to complain like that, but these are just things I noticed that it just doesn't quite fit in. It's like they just stuck these little festooned these little details on here, and the same I'd say for these taillights. They just don't seem to fit with the rest of the design theme that's going on here. And they're not LED either. They're not full LED taillights, which almost everybody else in this class now offers. Looking at the lower fascia, a couple more little details that I'm kind of giving the stink eye to. I like the look of it. It just looks like Kia's kind of going toward that fake exhaust pipe thing. Now Kia sort of treads the line between really faking it and just kind of putting design elements there that kind of give you the impression that it might be an exhaust tip, but come on, folks, we're better than this, aren't we? We're better than lying to consumers or trying to fool them into thinking something when it just isn't. And Kia just sort of treads the line between. It's like a white lie. It's not a full-blown, lie. It's a white lie. It could be an exhaust pipe, but you might think that in a dark parking lot. I will say, though, that rear hatch is a power hatch. Very helpful if you've got an armful of groceries, and that is expected here in this class today. What I've got inside of this thing is an interior that is very mid-century modern. I mean, look at this. In fact, I'm looking at this dash and I feel like I'm looking at the back of a 1963 Buick Wildcat. I've got the taillights, I've got the chrome trim in the center. The whole thing just spells 1960s, and I kind of like it in a way. Right across the dash and the door panels is this patterned plastic with a diamond inset that really looks kind of snazzy. And all of the finishes in here when it comes to the bright work is a satin finish. It's not bright chrome. Suffice it to say, there's a lot to look at in this interior. Now, being in the EX trim grade, there is an interesting mix of features here. There's a huge panoramic sunroof that really gives this space a lot of airiness. These seats, not leather though. These are actually vinyl seats they call Syntex. They're not ventilated, they are heated. They are comfortable though and do offer plenty of adjustment range. I do not have memory settings though, and the passenger does not have a power seat. The steering wheel is actually a nice piece. It has paddle shifters which have a high quality feel. The instrument cluster is a traditional 2-dial setup with a large digital center screen that can be programmed to display what you want to see. One of the things I have noticed with this interior is there's a lot of hard plastics all around here when your hand falls on the different spots. Kia's sort of getting away from the soft stitch trims, and I've just noticed that in the last few Kias I've tested, is that there's an increasing amount of cheaper materials on the interior. The center console is very simple. It has a cubby in the center with an openable lid. In there you have USB ports. There's also USB ports for both the second and the third row here. There is a wireless charger down in the center. Cup holders off to the side. This has a rotary dial shifter, which I hate. And this one is actually really bad. When you go to use it, it has a strange detent in the middle. It's not very intuitive. And it often pops back to neutral when you think you've told it to be in drive or reverse. It's just much better to have a regular lever here. They're much more intuitive, easy to use on the fly without having to look at it and fumble with it to see where you're at. Just behind it, drive mode selector and buttons for the parking brake and other ancillary things. In the center console, a nice big storage area. I'd say there's room for 2 square Kleenex boxes and maybe a couple of other things. And there is a little tray here on the top. The second row seating area is actually quite spacious and comfortable in my opinion. This does only come in a 6-passenger configuration, so that means I have captain's chairs with a pass-through in the center, and they do move forward quite easily at the press of a button to allow access to the third row. And looking at the third row, you can see that it's not the largest one in the class. Toyota Highlander, a little bit more space back there, and if you go up to the Kia Telluride Y, that's even larger. This is going to be comfortable for smaller adults and mostly children, and only 2 there in that third row. As you can see up here though, my legroom is actually pretty good. These seats are set for my height, about 5'8" with my tennis shoes on. You could have somebody very large and tall push that seat back and come in a little further, and I would be just fine. Lots of amenities back here, 12-volt outlet, USB, I got vents, I always like that, and the panoramic moonroof, of course. One of the things that's very nice is that these seats offer a good range of adjustment. I have a slide adjustment as well as a recline adjustment, and they also have fold-down armrests, which are pretty slick. Now, of course, these seats all fold down quite easily. The third row in a 50-50 split, and the second row seats actually fold down at the press of a button quite easily and quickly to give you a fully flat load floor back there. It's pretty spacious. Now, underneath that load floor, there's a small storage area where your jack and some other things are, and the spare tire is actually located underneath the vehicle. When it comes to rating this interior, I'm very pleased, as I said before, with this very artistic design theme. It's not something you see every day in a lot of the competitors. I do wish, though, they'd up the quality a little bit with some of the hard plastics, and I do think there's some features missing here at this price. Things like leather seats, ventilated seats, things like that. So interior gets 4 out of 5 stars. This infotainment system is not the top of the line you're going to find in the Kia Sorento line. Being in the EX, we have AM, FM, Bluetooth, Sirius XM is here, but not very much past that. You can connect this to Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, but it's not wireless like a lot of the competitors are offering now. It does have a smaller screen than a lot of the competitors at this price, only 8 inches, not the larger 10-inch screens that even Kia offers in some trim grades. This is it if you're getting the hybrid. There's also no nav here. The sound quality is okay. And really, the other thing I have to sort of dig on here is the fact that these menus and the graphics, not nearly as good as they could be. Using this to do simple things like tuning stations manually or storing your presets, not the easiest thing in the world. It's clear to me that different people are working on these systems than were 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. This infotainment system gets 3.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, my friends, let's go for a drive. Now, the first question I always like to ask is, how does it go? Come to a complete stop and go. Woo! Did you hear that? Got some scratch there. Lit those tires out pretty good. And 60. You know, if I didn't already know this was a hybrid, I would never know this is a hybrid. This thing actually has some pretty good power. It makes me smile, as you can see. This is a 1.6 liter gasoline engine, turbocharged. It has a 6-speed automatic transmission, and they've cleverly sandwiched an electric motor between the two. All in, it has 227 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. What this combination of bits and pieces gives us is a vehicle that drives very much like a non-hybrid car. The Toyota Highlander Hybrid, for example, has a CVT, a continuously variable hybrid transmission. You never feel that thing give you shift points. It just doesn't behave like a normal car. This doesn't behave like a hybrid. It shifts gears, it drives like a normal everyday crossover SUV. And it sounds like one too. The big difference is the fact that it has fuel economy. This is rated by the EPA at 39 city, 35 highway, and 37 combined. Now in my week with this, I actually achieved almost 40 mpg for most of the week until I did a little bit more highway driving, and I finished out the week with 39. Pretty good, I must say. And this powertrain is very refined. You can barely tell when it's shutting off and turning on the gasoline engine, when it's going back and forth between electric power. This electric motor, one of the reasons this does have such high fuel economy is because this thing can power this thing going down even the freeway on electric power only, up to 70, 75 miles an hour. So all in, I'm very happy with this powertrain. Really, the only one thing I could say about it that could be improved is it does tend to be a little bit noisy at times when you really push it hard, but overall, very impressed. 4.5 out of 5 stars. When it comes to ride, drive, and handling, this is a vehicle that's comparable to the Toyota Highlander Hybrid. It's about 2 inches shorter in wheelbase and about 4 inches shorter overall, but we're in the same ballpark. But if you're comparing the two, what I found about this is it does tend to feel a lot lighter on its feet because it is slightly lighter. This weighs about 4,000 pounds. And the handling on this is a little bit sharper. It has a stiffer suspension, and the steering feel is a bit sharper in my opinion. The drawback is it tends to have a little bit more road noise, and this chassis, one of the things I've noticed about it is that it tends to be a little bit harsh over bumps, and in my week with it I did notice a little bit of creaking and crunching in the steering when you were going over certain bumps or making parking lot maneuvers. It's like the bushings and the overall bolting it together isn't quite up to snuff. But that said, this is a chassis that does have a nice ride around town. It has a nice quiet ride on the highway, wind noise is low. It just could use a little bit more refinement. This chassis gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, my friends, now it's time to try to assign a value score to the Kia Sorento Hybrid. Now, Kia has always been a brand known for giving you the most for your money in terms of features and bells and whistles, things like that. They've also been known lately for having the longest warranties in the business. 10 years, 100,000 mile powertrain, 5 years, 60,000 mile bumper to bumper. And in the last 6 years, they have topped the J.D. Power consumer quality surveys. So customers are happy with their vehicles. When I've tested them, I've been very happy with them for the most part. They feel like they're worth more than they're charging for it. The quality, all of those things make them very exciting vehicles to look at out there. But this vehicle, along with the last 2 or 3 Kias I've tested recently, I'm starting to sense a little bit of a slip in the quality. The material quality on the interiors, starting to be cheaper materials inside, rattles and squeaks occasionally. I'm starting to notice chassis that don't quite feel as solid and as expensive as they used to. And so I don't know if Kia is starting to cut costs or whether they're lightening up their vehicles for fuel economy and it's starting to show up in the way the cars feel. I don't know which one it is, but something's starting to change. And I don't know if that's going to start showing up in the Consumer Reports quality surveys, but it's just something I have to talk about. So when we put value together here, quality takes a few demerits. That's just the way it is. We're still very good at 4.5 stars out of 5 for value. When you put that in with everything else we've already talked about, we're at 4 out of 5 stars for the total review. Very good. If you like the review you just saw, please see my latest one right there, or even better yet, subscribe to my YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.